my defining moment, which was before I even knew what entrepreneurship meant, was when I was faced with a major challenge for me at that point as an 18-year-old when I was at college. I had worked really hard to get into Cambridge University, to get a scholarship in order for me to be able to fund my education, given that I was from overseas. I was born originally in Hong Kong. I'd managed to get in, and I had found that while the work was pretty tough, I was studying as an architect, I really enjoyed rowing. It was a way of connecting with other people. I got very involved in the rowing team. And what happened at the beginning of the term, my second term after I was rowing every day, was my director of studies said to me, Roger, one thing I need to tell you is there's never been an architect that's come out of Cambridge who has rowed, and there's never been a rower who's came out of Cambridge that has been an architect. And what he meant by that is you just don't have enough time for both. So I got to the end of that first year and my grades weren't that great. And I was thinking, gosh, what am I going to do? Because my director of studies came back and says, you're going to have to do more with your portfolio. You're going to have to do more work on that. And at the same time, there was a boat, there's a crew camp that was taking place, which I had to be on if I was going to be competitive in rowing the following term. And on top of that, my friends who all had jobs in London, I didn't have any job at that point, they were going to Greece for a holiday. And I was going, gosh, it's like, what do I do? Because I'm not set up for any of this, and anything I do, I won't be able to do the other things. And I remember sitting there and just having a revelation one night, which is instead of me trying to figure out, like, do I do this or do this or do this, what if I just put it together as one question? And so I sat down and I wrote it down in my journal. The question was, how do I fill up my portfolio with great art in a way that allows me to be on the Cambridge rowing camp while making enough money to afford to go to Greece? And that was it, one question. And that's how every entrepreneur starts. They start by taking whatever it is they want in life and putting it into one question. When I asked that question, the answer came pretty quickly, which was, well, why don't I go out there and just draw pictures that I can sell? So the very next day, I went out and started drawing these little images of, and I used my best art I could do, of different parts of Cambridge which were tourist attractions, like King's College and so on. After 3 days of doing that, I went down to Sainsbury's, which is a local supermarket, and I bought a whole bunch of freezer bags. And then I went to Corquick, which was the photocopy company. And because I'd done them all black and white, I got the best paper I could find. I got them photocopied onto this. I put them in the freezer bags. And on the fourth day, I went out and I basically had a big sign which said, genuine Cambridge student, architecture drawings, 1 for £2, 3 for £5. And that was it. That was what I put out there. And I sat down, and what happened was, as people were walking by and I was drawing for the fourth day, and I was always doing this at about 10 in the morning when my rowing had finished, because rowing was every morning. So it gave me time to be drawing and earning money as well. And I was hoping that I might be able to make like a couple of £100 or something out of doing this. What happened was, as the day went on, people were stopping, they were giving me a bit of this, a bit of that. I noticed after a couple of hours that I'd made a bit of money, which was great, but it wasn't necessarily where I wanted to go. But I also noticed something else, which was flow was happening now, in that there'd be times when I was selling a lot more than other times. And I noticed that was when more people stood and watched me draw, then others would start to stop and watch me draw as well. And as a result of that, I was like, oh, maybe if I can find a way to ask people to stop. I started asking people for the time. You know, what's the time? And they'd stop, and then other people would stop, and then they'd start buying. So now I was making sales not because of my art, but because I was asking for the time. And then I noticed that when I did it with kids and families, then a whole family stopped. So I started asking kids, do you want to watch me draw for a bit? As they were walking by, and the kid would stop. And then, Mummy, Daddy, can we stop and can we watch? And then they'd stop and we'd get in a conversation, and then everyone else would stop. And by the end of the first day, I had actually netted, I think it was around about £100 or so, which was way more than I was ever expecting. And what happened was, within the first week, I found that I had made more money than my friends were making an entire month. And it was not because I had just come up with the idea, it's because I had gone out to experiment and see what was happening in the market. There's a huge difference between an academic, which is about an idea of how we go about making things happen, which is that an academic needs to know in order to do, whereas an entrepreneur needs to do in order to know. What happened was, when I was sitting there and I was starting to make the money, I started asking myself a different question, because I had a lot of time as I was sitting there drawing, which was, well, if I can get to £100, how do I get to £200? How do I double it again? And sometimes when you're out there just making things happen, then answers come by accident. I remember I was quite a few days in, and it was 10 o'clock. I think I'd got about 1 hour in, and I was drawing this new drawing. And an American tourist came by, and he stopped and he was looking at what I was doing. And he says, I'd like to buy that. And I said, well, you can come back like tomorrow or the next day because by then I'll have some prints of this and then you can buy the print. And he goes, no, I want to buy the original. And I was like, no, the original's not for sale. He goes, everything's for sale. Just name the price. So I thought about that and I thought, everything's for sale. Interesting. Well, I know that if I was to sit here for a day, I'd make £100. So what if he just paid me £100? And so I said to him, well, £100. He goes, sure, I'll do it, but you want to say unsigned original and sign your name on it. So I did, and he gave me the £100. And so I'm like, I don't have to work for the rest of the day because I've now made the money for the whole day. But it was 11 o'clock, and I said, well, what am I going to do? So I thought, well, I could just draw the same picture again. And so I just sat and I drew the same picture again. At the end of the day, I hadn't made 100, I made 200. I doubled it, and I still had the picture. And the next day I was like, well, that was interesting. Maybe that's what I should do again. And so I went for a first hour, and then I kind of like signed unfinished original and I put it up there, £100. And then I carried on with the rest of the day. And that doubled the income. The same thing happened another time when a shopkeeper came out and they said, I've been watching you drawing. Could you draw something for my shop? And I said, well, how much would you pay for that? But I was thinking in my mind, I was like, is there a way that he might pay more? I said, what would make this more valuable for you? And he said, well, I'm looking for more people to come into the shop. I said, well, if I could find a way that I could get to all the students in Cambridge with something really nice about your shop, would that be valuable? He goes, that'd be very valuable for me. I said, great. So I went home that night and I came up with this idea of doing a map of all of Cambridge, all in 3 dimension with nice drawings and putting the logos of different shops on the top. And so I then went out and I actually then said to each shop, would you like to be on this map? Because we're not just going to draw it, we're going to give it to all the students in Cambridge. And I had enough people who came on that map that first year that then grew into my first business, where by the time I was about 20, 21, we had 40 cities around the UK with a company called Cityscapes, which was doing several $1 million worth of business, all with young guys doing all these drawings and so on. And it all came out of just that one first step, which is me trying to figure out, how do I solve my problem here? How do I go on my rowing camp while also going to Greece, which I ended up going to, while also making sure that I was actually filling up enough of my portfolio to be able to pass my grades?